The NHL's socials highlighted an AHL Goal of the Year candidate from Fabian Lysell the other night, putting the hockey world on notice that he is ready to come up and make an impact for the Boston Bruins.
You're Locked On Bruins, your daily podcast on the Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Bruins fans, and welcome back to the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. I am your host, Ian Martin. This is a daily show where we discuss all things Spoked B. Thank you so much for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen every day. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. Happy Thanksgiving to all those who are celebrating or are still recovering from yesterday's celebration. Happy Black Friday. The Bruins are in action this afternoon against the New York Rangers, the first of a back-to-back this weekend. They will be hosting the Detroit Red Wings on Saturday. We'll take a quick look ahead at those games later on in the podcast. But first, we will be discussing the NHL, highlighting Fabian Lysell's unreal Goal of the Year candidate the other night against the Toronto Marlies and what it signals to the hockey world about him being ready to make the jump to the Boston Bruins. We'll also take a look at a great article from Amalie Benjamin on NHL.com talking about some important influences on Morgan Geeky and his current breakout, where he's among the league leaders in goals scored. Before we get into all that, quick reminder, you can find the podcast on socials at Locked NHL Bruins. I am your host again, Ian McLaren. I am a lifelong Boston Bruins fan, and I have been covering this team and the NHL for various major outlets for nearly 20 years. All right, we got to talk about Fabian Lysell. I mentioned him on yesterday's podcast and how he scored an unreal goal the other night against the Toronto Marlies. It was an end-to-end rush, highlight reel worthy dangles, dekes, and displaying the kind of skill that made him a first-round pick just a few years ago. It hasn't always been exemplary performance from Lysell at the AHL level. He has struggled with his 2A game at times, struggled to maybe do too much on his own. He's also dealt with injuries, but he has been playing very well for the Providence Bruins so far this season and really warrants a recall at this point in his career, especially with Matej Blümel having been injured in the other night's game against the New York Islanders, and strictly because of his play so far this season. Last year for Providence, Lysell had 11 goals in 52 games, which was down from 14 2 seasons prior, as well as 15 in 2023-24. This season, though, he's already got 8 goals in 14 games and is really showing that frustration or the disappointment of having been sent down to begin this season. He did come up late last year, played a dozen games, kind of took some time to get acclimated to the NHL game, and then finished the season very strong with like 3 points in the final 4 games. And his play so far this season, look, all due respect to Riley Tufte, who also had 8 goals before being called up to the Bruins. Alex Steeves, who was placed in the top 6, finding more of a fit in the bottom 6 for the Boston Bruins. And perhaps to Blümel, who has not done much at all to impress. Before he got injured the other night, he had an egregious turnover at the Islanders' blue line that led directly to a rush the other way and a goal from Matt Barzal. So if he's injured, even if not, right, he's been less than impressive. And the Bruins, if there's a spot on the roster then it should go to Fabian Lysell. He should, without question. Yeah, it was a slow day yesterday. No NHL games on the schedule, but for their social accounts to highlight that goal is pretty remarkable. Now, let's just talk a little bit about the Dauber prospect report. This is updated in November. And they say Lysell had started the season with the Providence Bruins, showing himself to be a weapon in the minors. Opened the year scoring 4 goals, 3 assists in 8 games. Of course, he had a 28.6 shooting percentage, but he still has been making good on his opportunities. And again, if he's being set up like he did the other night by Georgi Merkulov on the other goal he scored, that is a bonus as well if he can finish. He's only just about to be 23 years old, so by no means is he getting long in the tooth, but the Bruins or the NHL is littered with once hyped 20-year-old prospects who become solid 25-year-old AHL mainstays. It could be worth a gamble to knock on the door because Lysell still has value and a team just needs to unlock it and give him a chance to shine. He's in his 4th year in the AHL. His performance has been solid, even better than that so far this season. And Dauber writes, Boston will need to give him an NHL audition soon or move him to another team before his value as both a player and a fantasy asset diminishes. And we learned this week that he actually just did change his representation, which means he could be looking for a move or a push to be promoted to the NHL level. I've been hanging on to him in my keeper league, fantasy-wise, hoping that he makes an impact at some point. 14 points through 14 games so far this season. Yeah, last year was down in the AHL, but 2 seasons ago, he had 50 points in 56 games. This guy has proven that he can play. He might not fit the exact mold of a prototypical Boston Bruins player or the kind of guy that they want, that piss and vinegar, gritty, two-way player, solid in all 3 zones. You don't need 12 of those guys up front. If you pair him with the right people and deploy him responsibly, then there's every chance that he could take the tools that he's shown in the Providence and bring them up and show them off for the Boston Bruins. Look, Blümel has not shown anything since being called up, and he's done nothing to prove he deserves to be there over Lysell. The Bruins play a couple games this afternoon or this weekend. Points are at a premium. Recalling Lysell should be the next thing this team does, the next move they make. As of right now, it's around 10:15 a.m. on Friday morning. There are no Bruins AHL transactions to report. I really would love to see Fabian Lysell sooner than later. He's put it in the work. He, may not be the best two-way player, but you don't need everyone to play that kind of game. And the Bruins could benefit from the skill and the speed that he demonstrates on the AHL ice regularly so far this season. The NHL, talk about a highlight reel goal. You should definitely be keeping an eye on NHL Bruins prospect Fabian Lysell. Hopefully, he's no longer an NHL Bruins prospect, but soon he becomes an NHL Bruins regular. All right, coming up, we're going to discuss another guy who was given a chance and who broke out in Morgan Geeky, as well as take a quick look ahead at this weekend's action. All that coming up as Locked On Boston Bruins continues. Let's be honest, most of us can't even name all our financial accounts, let alone what they're worth. Between 401ks, savings, and investments, it's easy to lose track, and that can mean leaving money on the table. That's why I started using Monarch, an all in one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy to use interface on your laptop or your phone. It can help you organize your accounts, track your spending, get better handle on your investments without having to touch a spreadsheet. Their Monarch visual dashboards and smart tools make it easier to understand where your money's going and how to make it work harder for you. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNHL at monarch.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarch.com, code LOCKEDONNHL for half off your first year. Thank you so much again for making Locked On Boston Bruins your first listen of the day. And thank you for making the Locked On Network the number one sports podcast network, something we're extremely thankful for around here this Thanksgiving. Another thing I'm thankful for, as mentioned on yesterday's podcast, is Morgan Geeky. He is quickly becoming not just one of my favorite Bruins, but one of my favorite hockey players, period. And I've always been wondering, like, what is behind this breakout? How did he get to this position? How is he one of the top goal scorers in the NHL over the last calendar year? And full credit to Amalie Benjamin, NHL.com, one of my favorite hockey writers. She put out a great piece on Morgan Geeky yesterday and his influences from childhood up to around right now. And one of those, I had no idea this was the case, but Pat Falloon. Pat Falloon, you may remember, was a very highly touted draft pick. In fact, he was selected second overall by the San Jose Sharks back in 1991, one spot behind Eric Lindros, who was, of course, originally drafted by the Quebec Nordiques and went to the Philadelphia Flyers. First round pick for Boston that year, Glenn Murray. Very solid pick at number 18. Anyways, Pat Falloon is a native of Manitoba. And he, back in the early 2000s, was playing on a senior team, the Fox Warren Falcons of the North Central Hockey League in Manitoba, with none other than Craig Geeky, who had two, soon to be three young boys. He was a lefty, Craig Geeky was, and his oldest, Morgan, was a righty. So his sticks were not able to be used by his son. But Falloon was a righty, and Craig Geeky telling Amalie Benjamin that he was a cheap dad. So he was trying to be resourceful, recycle some sticks. So he took Falloon's righties, cut them down to kindergarten aged size for Morgan. And Falloon is a guy who scored 25 goals at the AHL level. He didn't have quite the career that was expected of him as a second overall pick, but it has a magic touch because these are the sticks that Morgan Geeky used as a toddler, and they were kind of like old wooden sticks, the kind that we don't really use anymore these days. Of course, it's all composites, but playing with that stick, taking it to the playground, playing in his basement, Morgan said he didn't think he would have as good of a shot if it wasn't for learning how to use that big wooden paddle and using a straight curve. Morgan himself calls it weird that he's in the same conversation as Leon Draisaitl, David Pastrnak, even Connor McDavid, Nathan McKinnon as top scorer in the NHL. It's becoming less so, Amalie Benjamin writes, and this is perhaps just becoming who he is. Last season started out rough. He was healthy scratched a bunch of times. He ended up with 33 goals, nearly double his previous career high from 2023-24. We thought it was maybe a fluke, an unsustainable shooting percentage, but he's only gotten more prolific this season. He has 17 goals so far this season, recently tied with Nathan MacKinnon for the league lead in goals. And we have to give Don Sweeney some credit here for plucking him off the free agent market and giving him a chance after the Seattle Kraken declined to extend a qualifying offer, and the Bruins came in, saw something in Geeky, believed there was something more in him in the summer of 2023. And back then, Sweeney said, could he get in an elevated position and produce more? Could he still have high-end production 5-on-5 and extend that to the power play? He has a really good release as a right shot. Turns out Don Sweeney was right. Geeky has been all the Bruins could hope for, and really so much more. So much so that Pasternak believes he can keep it going and hit the 50-goal mark in this league, not just once, but consistently. And that's fantastic value because he just signed a 6-year, $33 million contract. And, typically, or not typically, but sometimes when you sign a deal like that, maybe you take your foot off the gas and kind of coast a bit. But Morgan is the complete opposite of that, according to Bruins assistant Jay Leach. He works, he hones his craft. He came back to training camp and said, I am putting in the work. He looked faster. His shot looked harder and more accurate. And full credit to him for putting in the work to improve himself even after that breakout last year. Leach added, you knew he had a hard shot, but any one of us would be lying to you if they didn't say, hey, you're going to be a third, fourth line winger checker. What he's done is a testament to him and the work ethic and his belief in his ability. Leach fully admits he didn't think Geeky was on path to becoming a 40-goal scorer, but deep down, Morgan thought that. He had belief in that, and he believed in his shot. That, again, was honed using these old wooden sticks used by a second overall pick in Pat Falloon. Falloon, Amalie Benjamin reached out to him. He said he loves watching Morgan Geeky play. Not only the stick, the kid has done excellent. His whole game is incredible. Hand-eye, on the boards, getting loose pucks. It's more his upbringing with his brothers and his dad. But he does remember Geeky taking those sticks. And he would use those wooden sticks until he went to a tournament in Edmonton when he was around 11 or 12. And, those old wooden sticks aren't just going to cut it once you're playing against some bigger teams in bigger cities. But it did make a difference in developing his shot. And add in the fact that Craig Geeky wouldn't let his sons take slap shots until he believed they mastered and can control their wrist shot. And that was the recipe for a shot that has connected 17 times this season. His dad taught him how to shoot. He said he was a defenseman, so he thinks he can shoot, but he can't as well as Morgan can. But the main ingredient, the family motto, in fact, is you need to work your beep off, according to Craig. And Morgan has found success far beyond what most expected in those brief years in Carolina, who drafted him, years in Seattle, and now he's becoming a household name. And Craig Geeky said, it's pretty surreal for the family. That's the stuff that kind of gets you going, holy beep, this is pretty good. Draisaitl's one of a kind. Pasternak's one of a kind. Connor David is one of a kind. And to be in that conversation is surreal. Now, going back to my fantasy team, I do have Morgan Geeky on this team. I traded him straight up this past summer for Spencer Knight, who admittedly I didn't think would be this good this season for the Chicago Blackhawks. But again, $5.5 million for this guy who could be at least a perennial 30 goal scorer with 40, perhaps 50 upside. That's a steal for the Bruins. And it's awesome to see that the hardworking wooden stick mentality from Manitoba is sticking with him. I would love to see his brother Connor make that step as well. I also have him on my Geeky Blinders roster. Perhaps that will come because he's playing pretty well for AHL, Tampa's AHL team right now, and could have a call up sooner than later. Anyways, great story from Amalie Benjamin. Check that out on NHL.com. And hopefully we'll see Morgan scoring some big goals this weekend against the Rangers and the Red Wings. We'll take a look at those games coming up as the podcast continues. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. You can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team's making that late push. Not just for the NBA, obviously, you can get in on the action with the NHL. For example, today's Rangers-Bruins game, the over-under is set at 5.5 goals. Igor Shesterkin, Jeremy Swayman, make your picks there. Now, if you put down $5 as a new FanDuel user and that bet hits, you'll get $300 in bonus bets. Head to FanDuel.com, sign up today, play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, the Boston Bruins have 2 games coming up in the next, 30 hours or so. They will host the New York Rangers on Friday afternoon in what they're calling the Thanksgiving Showdown, although it's Black Friday. And then they will host the Detroit Red Wings on Saturday evening, which is the first of a home and home between those two teams because Boston will be in Detroit on Tuesday. Now, the Red Wings are playing their own game today, so there will be no advantage for them being a bit more rested. They will be hosting the Tampa Bay Lightning coming up at noon on Friday, 1 hour before the Bruins begin their game against the New York Rangers. The Rangers off to a bit of a rough start so far this season. They're 12-11-2. The Bruins are 14-11. So this is a pretty crucial game in terms of trying to make some distance between playoff and non-playoff teams. Technically, the Bruins right now are third in the Atlantic, 2 points behind the division-leading Lightning. But in the Eastern Conference and based on games played, they sit 11th in the East based on point percentage. They are ahead of the Rangers. Each team has played 25 games, which is the most among all Eastern Conference teams. So the Bruins could either fall back and become level with the Rangers or make up some ground, pick up some valuable points against another team that's kind of chasing it early on. It's the first of 3 meetings between these two teams. And the Rangers, of course, have one of the best goalies in the NHL in Igor Shesterkin, although he's 9-8-2 with a 911 save percentage. Jeremy Swayman, we gave him his flowers yesterday for his incredible November so far, in which he has a 935 save percentage. He's brought his season mark up to 915. Obviously, with the back-to-back, Korpisalo will likely get one of the starts. He's got an 878 save percentage. Doesn't really have my trust in net. You look at the AHL goalies, going back to the Lysell conversation, they have both been playing excellent. I would love to see Michael DiPietro up here at the NHL level over Korpisalo, but that, of course, would take some sacrifices when it comes to putting him on waivers and eating some of that salary. Points-wise, this team is led by Artemi Panarin, who's got 22 points in 25 games, followed by Mika Zibanejad, who's got 16 points. Adam Fox has 22 points in 25 games as well from the blue line. Special teams-wise, the Rangers have the 17th ranked power play, 19th ranked penalty kill. The Bruins are now almost top 5 in both categories. 4th ranked power play, 7th ranked penalty kill. So special teams, as always, will have an impact in this one. The Rangers aren't scoring much this year, averaging only 2.56 goals per game, which may be why they go to Korpisalo today instead of the more high-powered Red Wings tomorrow. 30th in the NHL in goals for per game. The Bruins are 18th with 3.08 goals per game. The defense, though, still lagging behind the offense. The Bruins at 3.12 goals per game, 20th ranked, whereas New York's defense is stellar. They have the 4th ranked defense, 2.6 goals per game. So they're not scoring much, but they're giving up a bit more than they're scoring marginally. Bruins scoring a bit more, but still giving up more goals, and they're scoring on average, which is not a huge recipe for success. The Rangers are coming off wins over St. Louis and Carolina. The Bruins coming off that win over the Islanders, lost to San Jose. Previous to that was a win over the Kings. The Red Wings right now are a point behind the Boston Bruins. They have a better point percentage, just marginally, at .563 compared to Boston's .560. When you look at goal differential, the Bruins are at an even 0, whereas the Red Wings have the lowest goal differential in the Eastern Conference at -8, and they're coming in having lost 2 in a row. So they're reeling a little bit. If they lose today to Tampa, they will be a bit more desperate tomorrow. But either way, this is a huge weekend for differentiating yourselves as contenders for a playoff spot or pretenders. The Bruins have an opportunity to pick up 4 big points here on home ice against Atlantic and Eastern Conference rivals, all of whom are challenging for spots. It's crazy right now. The Lightning are first in the Atlantic with 30 points. The Rangers are last in the Metro with 26 points. That just shows you how tight things are in terms of the top teams in the East. There's really nobody who is too far out of it, although you could argue that the Sabres at 22 points are right there. But there's still a lot of hockey to be played this season. 59 games for the Sabres, 60 games for some teams. And only one team in the East under 500, and that is the Buffalo Sabres. So it's going to be a real gauntlet, compressed schedule because of the Olympics. And we're seeing that this weekend with these 2 games in 2 days. So it's going to be a good one. Tune in this afternoon, 1 p.m. I'll jump on socials afterwards for a quick, immediate reaction and bring you all the latest on the black and gold, because that's what we do here on the Locked On Boston Bruins podcast. Thank you so much for making it your first listen once again. For your second listen, check out NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until the Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Local analysis on a national scale. You can find Locked On NHL Game Night on the Locked On NHL YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts. Please do subscribe to Locked On Boston Bruins on both if you have not done so already. Please take care of yourselves, friends. Take care of each other. And we'll talk to you again here on the next episode of Locked On Boston Bruins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network.